Hi, my name is Chandra Parker, and this is a screencast for ESL Linguistics Theory and Analysis, course EDU 583 through Georgetown. In this screencast, we will analyze the native language of an English language learner from Puerto Rico who speaks Spanish. The analysis will include a description of the student's background, heritage, culture, language, and the ways these serve as an asset in acquiring English and becoming bilingual. The analysis will include speaking and writing samples as a means to understand how one affects the other, as well as a comparison of the phonetic characteristics of each language. The analysis will result in recommendations for mainstream content teachers and what it means for them in the classroom. So let's look at my student's home life. The student's name has been changed, but for this project, we will call him Jose. Jose lives in a two-parent home with two brothers. One brother is in ninth grade and the other is in kindergarten. Jose is a 13-year-old eighth grader at North Middle who came from Puerto Rico last November. The student has been here approximately 9 months, and his family speaks Spanish in the home as their primary language of communication. Looking at Jose's WIDA scores, he has a listening 1.9, speaking 1.5, reading 1.6, writing 2.1, with an overall score of 1.7. Jose's scores indicate that he is in the very beginning phase of English acquisition. Although Puerto Rico is under U.S. control as a territory and both Spanish and English are the official languages, less than 20% of Puerto Ricans are proficient in English. However, schools and official business of Puerto Rico are done in Spanish. We're going to look at the socio-linguistic aspects. It is important to know your students' cultural norms. Family, for example, in Spanish, family or familisimo, as it is known by Puerto Ricans, refers to the closeness and connections established within the family unit. The unit, however, is not comprised of just the immediate family of mother, father, and children. It is comprised of the grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Family is the center for all that is done and is built on in the system of what is known as the compadrazgo, which literally means co-parenting. Let's look at the heritage alphabet. It is important to know about your student's heritage alphabet. The Spanish alphabet is comprised of 27 letters of the Latin alphabet, just one more than the English alphabet, which is also adapted from Latin. The Spanish alphabet consists of 22 consonants and 5 vowels. There is one extra consonant in the Spanish alphabet, which is the letter N, which is pronounced Nye. There are approximately 30 sounds, and 3 of those sounds are represented by digraphs, or a combination of letters making one sound, such as 2 L's, which makes Lye, CH, che, and R, which makes the vibrating R, arre. Impact on learning. Students may have some difficulty forming certain sounds in the English language because the sounds are unfamiliar in their native tongue, and therefore they are not used to forming their mouths to make the sounds. For example, in Spanish, the short O is often pronounced as the short A in English. Thus, often Spanish speakers will pronounce and spell the short O in the form that is familiar in their primary language. It is also important to understand some of the common grammar transfer difficulties. This is not so the educator drills grammar or overcorrects. This simply is so the educator is aware of the why behind the mistakes and can demonstrate through meaningful learning. Here is the speaking sample from Jose.
My first class is English. I walk to the class, to the room, go insist table, and sit down on the chair. I look under the room. There are 2 liters windows in the back of the room. There is a big
Okay, so let's look at this with a little bit more detail. Let's take this speaking analysis. Well, Jose is in the early production of speaking where he is still absorbing English and therefore he uses short words and sentences. Jose does not feel comfortable yet reading in front of the class, and so the recording was done in a setting with the teacher, Jose, and one other adult in the room. Jose's affective filter was elevated due to having another adult in the room, and thus this was noted by the teacher. Speaking analysis continued. There are several words that pose specific challenges, such as inside, windows, white, and desk. The word window, where the diphthong OW sound is a letter combination that is unfamiliar, although the sound is not. So the letter combination is unfamiliar, but the sound O as in window is not. However, in Spanish, it is a monophthong, which makes the sound, and which is used and is very similar to the English OW. There are sounds that, with given time and modeling, Jose will be able to recognize and master because it is a sound that he currently has in his native language. However, the letter combination is different. Because the rules for speaking Spanish seem to be straightforward, where each letter is enunciated, Jose tends to transfer this same concept to English. This is recognized in his pronunciation of the word white and inside, where he wants to enunciate each letter. Here's Jose's writing sample, and they was given the task to talk about their favorite person. And so he wrote about Don Omar, who is his favorite singer. So let's take a look at the writing analysis. The purpose of this writing prompt was informational. It was easy to follow. The textual function of register, which involves forming sentences that are grammatically correct and sound, were applied. Jose used short words and sentences just as he had done in his speaking. The genre Jose produced was a personal description about his favorite singer. Because Jose is still learning to navigate the usage of English in written and spoken form, he has not developed the richness of language as of yet. However, with more interaction with English, he will develop over time a richer vocabulary from which he can draw. Jose currently correctly punctuated his sentences, and thus that is an area that he has made great strides in progress. In Spanish, they take the exclamation mark and put it at the beginning and the end. They also do that with question marks, and so to see him punctuating his sentences well was very exciting. Moving Jose on up. Decreasing his affective filter and reassuring him that not only is it an advantage for him to be bilingual, but that it is welcomed. Jose is seated next to a student who is proficient in both English and in Spanish, and I use Google Translator a lot. It is one of my best friends. Continued opportunities for Jose to engage in meaningful dialogue with his peers by means of reading and speaking. Continue to use Jose's WIDA can-do goals, along with altering and differentiating his assignments in conjunction with scaffolding his learning with his native language. By continuing to use Jose's native language to build his English acquisition, the experimental function of register, where he makes connections using his native language, is being implemented. This is known as ideational metafunction, or the language used to represent ideas. Moving on up, continued. The more opportunities Jose has to write in ways that emulate real-life contexts which are meaningful, the better his writing will get. The more he will be able to produce richer vocabulary, and the more complex his sentences will become. This is known as the interpersonal component of register, where students interact with others, allowing them to hear and use English, which ultimately leads to the textual component, where students are able to form grammatically correct and sound sentences. Let's look at what this means for content and mainstream teachers. Well, first they must be familiar with the ELL students' PSP and accommodations. They must understand and celebrate the students' heritage language. Use systematic functional linguistic approach to teaching language. Be familiar with the phonetics of their students' language and how it aligns and differs from English, and understand best practices in teaching and assessing writing and speaking. So let's look at the PSP, which is the Program Service Plan. The PSP will provide the teacher with the following information: the native language spoken, what they can do in English, grade level, and the accommodations. This is the first step to getting the baseline knowledge of their student. Now, understanding and celebrating the student's heritage language. It is important to understand the ELL student's first language, the cultural norms, the beliefs, and the customs of the student that may have an impact in the classroom setting. In addition, students who are bilingual fare better, and students who are monolingual, and the more proficient the ELL is in their native language, the better off they will be academically and cognitively. Let's look at systematic functional linguistics. There are several ways to effectively develop students' language needed for school. However, the systematic functional linguistic view of language helps to make meaning making resource, not an inventory of structures. The approach is beneficial in ELs because it teaches the core components needed for language by interweaving it into instruction through meaningful dialogue, reading, writing, and learning. Now, in other words, a functional approach allows students to make sense of what they learned while enabling them to tie their learning to their prior knowledge and experiences. Let's look at why it's important to be familiar with the phonetics of the student's language and how it aligns and differs. It's important that we understand the students' the phonetics that align and how they're different, because it'll help us to understand what we need to model before them. What are those sounds that are different? What are those sounds that are like? What are those sounds that they don't even have in their language? And so it will allow us to know how to model for the student. And last thing we want to look at is best practices in assessing our students. One of the best ways in teaching and assessing is one that the sheltered instruction approach, known as specifically designed academic instruction, addresses ELs in the following. They learn grade appropriate content, master English vocabulary and grammar, learn academic English, develop strategies for learning how to learn. And again, this is done through the SIOP, okay? The specifically designed academic instruction to English. Also, this aligns well with the universal design. Lastly, the as for of approach for assessment is another recommendation for mainstream teachers, and the as for approach is combined to address both formative and summative assessments, and it's this on-the-job process by which students interact with content, language, and grammar in a social means that is functional and accommodate alternative assessment, which has been proven to be the most effective in for ELL students. I'd like to thank you for your time. And again, you may go to my website, my blog, which will give you more information. It is parkertell.wordpress.com. If you have any more questions, that's parkertell.wordpress.com.